Coming up next on Tech News Weekly, it's me, Jason Howell, and Mikah Sargent. We talked to four awesome people. We've got the 450-page report from the House Subcommittee on Antitrust against big technology. That's out. We've got a review of the new Nest Audio by Google. We're reading the tea leaves ahead of the Apple iPhone 12 event, what we expect next week, and the challenges facing Cruise and Waymo safety drivers in the age of COVID and California fires. All that and more up next on Tech News Weekly. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure, even when they're working remotely. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 154, recorded Thursday, October 8th, 2020.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's Advanced Technology Center is like no other testing and research lab, with more than $500 million of equipment, including OEMs like Dell Technologies, and it's virtual, so you can access it 24/7. To learn more and get insights into all that it offers, go to wwt.com/twit.
And by LastPass. LastPass can help you manage identities and promote good security behaviors while your employees are remote. Visit lastpass.com/twit to find out how they can help you. And by Expressvpn. Protect your online privacy with one click. Yes, it's that easy. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/TNW.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am Mikah Sargent and don't currently smell like gasoline.
Oh boy, I'm Jason Howell, and I picked up a car from the mechanic this morning, and all morning I've been working smelling like a hint of gasoline. Consequently, I was downstairs earlier talking with my wife, and she notified me that there was a fly parked on my head for a little bit. So, maybe they're related, or maybe it's something completely different. Who the heck knows why that happened?
Days? Who knows?
Anywho, we've got 4 interviews today, so let's get started here. Nearly 1.5 years after Congress began its antitrust probe into the world's biggest tech companies, the House Subcommittee on Antitrust has released a 450-page report documenting the biggest examples of anti-competitive behavior and also has some ways to address that behavior going forward. Joining us to talk about the report is Mathew Ingram, who wrote about this today for the Columbia Journalism Review. Welcome back to the show, Mathew.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure, man. I love your work, and I'm so happy to get you on anytime we can. So let's, I guess first we should probably talk a little bit about the process leading up to this. We've had some hearings. This has been in the works for a year, almost a year and a half now anyways. To what depth did the House Subcommittee dive, let's say, to put this report together, and kind of what's the overarching conclusion?
So they actually went into considerable depth. I mean, I'm actually kind of impressed at the extent to which they tried to dive into these issues. I mean, which are extremely complex and in depth. It's a 450-page report. There's something like 300 pages of supporting documentation. They got, I think, over 1.2 million documents from the companies themselves, including emails. I think Google gave them 1 million. So it was maybe trying to overload them with volume, but they did go into a surprising amount of depth. And so some of the hearings, I don't know if you've watched some of them or read about some of them. Some of them were more shallow than others. Some, it was mostly Congress people grandstanding and trying to make their own sort of cherry pick their own points. But the report itself is quite extensive. And obviously the overall conclusion, which I mentioned, is that these are effectively monopolies in their markets, in that they're they're effectively abusing their power, their market power, in a variety of ways.
A variety of ways, yeah. Now, the report does kind of spell out some new rules that would, of course, work to address a lot of these concerns. Reading through the rules, like, is there anything there that really stands out to you that kind of seems like it would be effective, considering the size of these companies as they are right now, or kind of what strikes you about these rules?
So there's a whole series of big and small steps that this committee would like Congress to take. Obviously, whether they do or not remains to be seen. But so there are large moves, like, for example, they suggest that we might be better off if Google was forced to divest itself of, say, DoubleClick, or if Facebook was forced to divest itself of Instagram and WhatsApp. There's a lot of debate about whether that would actually help things or whether it would make things worse. Then there are smaller things, like they would like antitrust authorities to effectively assume that these large platforms, any acquisition they make is by definition anti-competitive unless they can prove otherwise, which I think is interesting. So effectively the onus is on them to show that it isn't anti-competitive, and that might prevent them from buying future Instagrams.
The onus being on them, that actually leads perfectly kind of into something that I was thinking when I was reading through your write-up here, is that I was reminded that, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, had said in the past that he welcomes regulation. That, coupled with the fact that, maybe up until very recently, but Facebook had not really done a whole lot to address a lot of these concerns prior. It was always just, it would come back in many ways to we're open to regulation. Maybe that's what we need, instead of just making the stand and making changes to how they behave. The onus being on them to make the change. Maybe it's not always going to work out that way. Do you envision at all that the conclusions of this report are what Zuckerberg had in mind? I'm guessing no, but what do you think?
I mean, for sure, a whole bunch of them are not. I think by making those comments, he was hoping to kind of be invited to help, shape the regulations, or at least to kind of try and shape them in a way that he would like. These are clearly, lots of them are things that he would very much not like to do. And I mean, all of the tech platforms said that the sort of core assumptions in this report are incorrect, that they don't have monopoly power, that they have lots of competitors, their products are great and free, and so why is everyone complaining?
Okay. So that's no surprise at all to know that all the tech companies probably did not appreciate kind of what was found here. One thing that I suppose surprised me, and you write about this in your article, is that the report began in a bipartisan way, but ultimately it ended with just Democratic signatures, and kind of showing how not bipartisan we've come to at this point with this report, and probably and obviously in many other ways, but especially with this report. Why the party line split? What happened along the way that had the parties kind of splitting down the line on this?
So it feels to me, based on looking at the two sort of alternative documents that came from Republicans, that Democrats went too far for them. So recommendations about breakups or splitting up companies or, stopping acquisitions and so on was just too much for them. So they, I think, were on board with lots of the other smaller recommendations, things related to maybe interoperability or allowing competitors more access, or, trying to stop them from preferencing their own products, for example, but they drew the line at things like forcing divestitures or preventing acquisitions or full-on breakups.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier also, which I definitely noticed in watching what I did around the hearings that happened over the last year and a half, is that they really seemed to kind of lack any serious teeth. It was, largely informational, of course, but even within what they were, it was kind of more an opportunity to see the people in charge from these big tech companies in the hot seat being grilled, and fingers wagged at them, versus any, really resulting in any actual change. Do you think that this report signals actual change, or this bipartisan split that's going to stop this in its tracks, and there's going to have to be, months, years of negotiation to get to a point to where the tech companies are facing something that might actually force them to change their behavior? What do you think?
I mean, I'm probably closer to the latter. I would think it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of negotiations. We're probably going to go through a change in government, or maybe. And so a lot of these, things are this current committee and this current Congress maybe wants to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, these are the things we would like to do. Whether those things, any of them actually come to fruition, remains to be seen. There's also individual actions going on. Department of Justice is going after Google, from the sounds of it. The FTC is going after Facebook. So there will be action taken, but in terms of broad, dramatic sort of moves in the area of antitrust, I wouldn't expect it to come anytime soon.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was feeling as well. All right, Mathew, always a pleasure getting you on. Mathew Ingram, of course, writing for the Columbia Journalism Review, cjr.org. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you, Mathew?
Probably Twitter's the best, at Mathew I with 1 T.
Right on. Thank you so much for carving out time for us today. We appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon, Mathew.
Thanks, Mathew. Up next, folks may not have been all that excited about the latest Pixel phone, but there's another product that's making positive waves. Sound waves.
I see what you did there.
But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT began building its Advanced Technology Center, the ATC, about 10 years ago, and it has grown exponentially. It's like no other testing and research lab. The lab contains more than $500 million in equipment from hundreds of OEMs and key partners ranging from heavyweights like Dell Technologies, VMware, and Intel, to emerging disruptors like Equinix. WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have been with them for over a decade because they know WWT is where they can go to get the answers they need to make sure their business runs right. The ATC is an incubator for IT innovation, and it offers on-demand and schedulable labs like Dell's VxRail, PowerStore, Unity, PowerMax, Data Protection Central, and IDPA. These labs represent the newest advances in primary storage. There are hundreds of labs to explore, including multi-cloud, hyper-converged infrastructure, networking, secondary storage, data analytics, AI, and more. And while I may not know what all of those terms mean, I certainly just get some joy thinking about saying these words and somebody out there going, oh, they have that? They have that? Yes, they have that. They have so much. You can learn about products before you launch. WWT's engineers use these environments to quickly spin up proofs of concept and pilots using the ATC lab environment so customers can confidently select the best solution. In many cases, this reduces concept time from months to weeks, which increases speed to market. It also offers Lab as a Service, a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here, customers can perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has already built. It's virtual, so you can take full advantage of ATC's unique benefits anywhere in the world 24/7. WWT engineers work in these labs every day, beta testing new equipment and building reference architectures and custom integrations to help their customers make decisions and see results faster and with much less investment. WWT has launched a digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. This ever-evolving platform creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world for their customers and partners. Get full access to articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools that make the difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about WWT, the ATC, and to become a member of their growing community, go to wwt.com/twit to create an account and gain access to its on-demand labs today. WWT simplifies the complex. That's WWT.com/twit. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. Thank you, WWT. We appreciate you.
We do appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right. This next interview is all about Google hardware. Last week, we had a large discussion around all of the hardware from the event. This week, we're going to focus on one of the pieces of hardware that Google unveiled, Google Home 2020. Also known as Nest Audio, because no one's called it Google Home 2020, but that's what it is, basically. Joining us to talk about it is Daniel Bader from Android Central, who posted his review of the device not too long ago. Welcome back to the show, Daniel.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to get you on, man. So obviously, this is the first update in 4 years for this like mid-range Google Home, now renamed Nest Audio. We should probably start with the design because it definitely looks a lot different than the device that I have downstairs in 2 different rooms. So tell us a little bit about the design, how it compares between the older version, and I don't know. Do you think those changes are meaningful? What do you think about it?
Well, if you've ever seen or used a Google Home Max, I'm probably going to butcher some of these names because some float between Google and Nest and Home and not Home, but the big guy, the one that was released in 2017, $399. It looks very much like that, except it's vertically oriented, and it's kind of just a little baby Max. It's lovely. It's very heavy. It's got a metal frame, so there's aluminum. Sorry, it's covered in fabric, like most of the other Google products released in the last couple of years. It is made of. It has a metal frame inside of it, though, which there's aluminum on the front and magnesium on the back, and this is meant to improve the actual performance of the speaker because it prevents rattling inside this really large tweeter and woofer combination. And generally, it's extremely heavy. It's 2.6 pounds for a tiny little speaker. That's not that much bigger than the Google Home itself. So there's a lot of hardware in here. It's really well made. And honestly, it just, because there are no screens, the LEDs don't light up at all unless you're using it. It just kind of like disappears into your decor. And I totally love it for that reason.
Nice. One of my concerns about it is the fabric choice, which I think looks great. We've got one of the old Google Homes in our kitchen. It's up on the windowsill, right in front of the sink, and cooking happens there and everything. So I'm a little nervous about that. Like I could totally see like a tomato sauce splashing up there, and then you just have to deal with that on your Google Home for the rest of eternity, or however long it lasts. So I suppose there's that. You'll have to clean it, but
I would not put this anywhere near your sink. Just avoid the kitchen with this thing. I've actually got a Nest Hub Max in my kitchen because the screen seems to be pretty good with splashes of water. But yeah, this is not a bathroom or a kitchen speaker unless it's far away from the sink.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes a lot of sense. Now, one of my other, not concerns, but questions definitely is about the sound. Like I said, we have our main Google Home. We have 2 of the original ones throughout our home downstairs. One in the living room, one in the kitchen. They both get used for music all the time. So this would definitely replace one of those. How does the sound compare?
So compared to the Google Home, it's night and day. The Google Home, for the time, sounded pretty good, right? Compared to the Amazon Echo, I think it was back then. It was the 2nd gen Echo, which was still a large, tall cylinder. It sounded pretty good for the size, but when you compare them side by side, the Nest Audio versus the Google Home, it really is a completely different sound signature. The Nest Audio is much clearer. It is much more spacey or airy. You get to hear the different instruments in different parts of the speaker, even though it is just a mono kind of one tweeter, one woofer. But it's much wider. It has much wider soundstage. It's more accurate. So their bass is not elevated the same way that it is on the Google Home. So you hear bass because the physical woofer is larger, but it's in equal measure to the mid-range and the treble, which also means that your vocals are going to sound much more prominent in some of your more vocal heavy songs, as well as for podcasts. So this thing will project in a large room in a way that the Google Home never really could.
This is why I'm super happy that we had you on to talk about this this new product, because I had seen actually quite a few people kind of talking positively about the Nest Audio, and having that product be the one that really stood out in otherwise, phone hardware wise, I should say, lackluster event, which I think is what is going to happen with the Apple event too. New phones, okay, but other stuff that happens there might be more interesting. But you coming on to talk about it because of your ability to talk about the audio and actually get into the nitty gritty. And so I wanted to ask you, we talked about how this maybe isn't something to put next to your sink or next to a bath, I guess. But the way that it kind of seems to be, Google is pushing it in one way is, like you said, is a podcast living room type device for podcasts and music. But tell me about the experience as a sound system of sorts for your entertainment center. Do you see this product serving as that? Because I kind of think of one on the left and one on the right side of the television. Not only does it look nice because of the way that this is shaped and the way that it looks, but it also seems like the audio may finally be able to hold up as a sound system.
So that was one of the first things I asked. Could this be used with a Chromecast with Google TV as dedicated wireless speakers next to your television? The answer, unfortunately, is no. You can't use it like that. This is only a Chromecast, so you can cast audio from an app that supports the cast standard, which is many, but it does not mean that you can even send you can't send a YouTube signal to this, because it doesn't recognize the Nest Audio as a screen. So for me, I like to actually just I have YouTube Premium, so I can open my phone and just listen to YouTube videos while the phone is in my pocket, kind of like a podcast. You can't do that with this. You can't just project YouTube. But anything that is an audio cast target, Spotify, YouTube Music, whatever, you can absolutely send to this. You can pair it together in stereo, so you can have a dedicated left and right channel. And I actually spent a lot of time in my testing putting it next to a Sonos One, which is a $200 smart speaker that happens to support Google Assistant. I also compared it to the $99 Amazon Echo 3rd Gen, which is about to be replaced with a better sounding 4th Gen, but I don't have that yet. And I also compared it to the original Google Home. So I would take Spotify and I would change the source target after about 30 seconds. I would listen to 30 seconds. I would change it. I would listen to the same song, same part for 30 seconds. And what I found was that while the Sonos One did sound better, only by a little bit, and it's double the price. So the Sonos One does have slightly sweeter mids. It does feel like you're kind of more like a part of the music, if you will, but not as much as to justify spending double the cost. And then if you pair two of these together for that same $200, you really do get a beautiful stereo experience that you don't really get with another kind of, two Amazon Echoes, because the quality of the Echo just isn't there when you have them in stereo mode.
Hearing you talk about, the lack of ability to interoperate this with other, pieces of Google's hardware ecosystem just bums me out. And it really reminds me of the Chromecast for Google Home. It has another example of this, how it launched without Stadia support, which,
oh my God,
I mean, it's just in both
so
cases,
ridiculous.
It really feels like Google's, big missed opportunities to really kind of dive deeper on their hardware efforts. Maybe there's a good reason behind the scenes, but as a consumer, what I want when I've got a home full of their hardware is I want that interoperability. I would love to be able to pair my music, these devices together in creative ways like that. And when it doesn't happen, it's not just a disappointment that it doesn't happen. I feel like it speaks about Google's lack of dedication to kind of respecting its hardware on a deeper level and respecting the consumers for what they might want out of their hardware on a deeper level. What do you think about that?
So I asked Google about this exact thing. I got briefed on the Nest Audio, and what they're saying is this is a Nest product. and it's first and foremost a speaker. So it is not meant to be an auxiliary to a television because it wasn't designed for that. It was designed as a standalone $99 speaker that happens to be really good at what it does. It was purpose-built. It's also a Google Assistant machine. And what I mean by that is it processes Google Assistant commands faster than any other speaker on the market. It has dedicated hardware. It does so faster than even the Nest Mini that was released last year. And it just is a great Google Assistant experience from front to back. But what Google said, and they kind of doubled down on this, was that if you're upset that it can't be paired to a TV because you want to use it as a whole home or as a TV speaker set, you have to understand that Google is focusing on whole home audio, which means that it doesn't want this to just be an auxiliary to a TV. It wants you to be able to pair speakers in any room of the house and listen a la Sonos to your music wherever you are. So you can have this paired with a Nest Hub or a Nest Hub upstairs or a Nest Mini in your bathroom or something in your basement, and you can listen to the same song throughout your house with no sync issues. And this is really what Google wants to reinforce, is that you're getting a great audio experience wherever you are. And if you want something that sounds fantastic for $100, buy this one. But we really don't care which Nest product you buy. If you want to spend more and buy the big Nest, Google Home Max, you can do that. If you want the $50 Nest Mini, you can do that too. As long as they're all paired together, we're happy.
But I guess in the words of the best taco shell commercial that's ever existed, why not both? Why not both? Be a television extension and also a device as a whole home audio? I especially because of how well, thank you, John, how well I have seen the multi-speaker audio stuff from Google work. I think Google and Amazon have 1,000% nailed or are working on nailing and have made incredible strides on saying, I want to play audio in this room, and because you set it up that way, it knows that means that you want to play it on these 3 devices and those 2 devices. Do you think, as someone who's been kind of following Google and asking some great questions, is this a missed area? Is Google maybe working on something else that can be the audio extension for your television? It just seems so missed, given that Google TV and the YouTube television subscription, I know there's just so many different names, YouTube television subscription dealie. You would think that they would also want to provide audio hardware there. So yeah, I guess I'm curious if you feel editorially if this is a missed place, or you're kind of okay with them not being in this specific field. So
there are some smart speakers and sound bars that have Google Assistant built in. So there's I believe it was 2 years ago at, I want to say either CES or Google I/O, that there was a JBL smart speaker, a sound bar rather, unveiled, and it eventually came to market, and it was fine, right? It offered a decent soundbar experience that happened to have Google Assistant built in. I just don't think the cast infrastructure is really built around projecting audio wirelessly. I don't know if the hardware is capable of it. I think the fact that most Chromecasts have been dongles that really don't have the necessary hardware to project audio wirelessly to a Chromecast speaker. Maybe the NVIDIA Shield would be able to do that because it's got some robust hardware in there. But perhaps Google just doesn't want to focus on this particular area. And I know, when you and I spoke about the HomePod back in the day and just how amazing it sounded, one of those keystone features was the ability to pair 2 HomePods to an Apple TV 4K and get really good audio that way. But that's also like a $700-800 solution. Yeah,
very expensive solution.
This would be a lot cheaper, and I understand that, but it's potentially because it's so much cheaper, some of that connectivity just had to be it had to be put to the side for now.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, overall, it seems like your article is talking in a similar fashion about this device as many of the other reviews that I've read, which all seem more or less pretty darn positive on this device as the kind of upgrade from the original. So it sounds like a device that I'm going to probably be picking up here at some point to replace one of my legacy Google Homes. I don't know where that one's going to then move. It's like Google Home chess in the house. It's like, oh, I got a new piece. Where does this one go? Anyways, Daniel Bader, it's always a pleasure getting you on the show. Thank you so much for hopping on. Android Central, of course, is where you can find Daniel's work. If people want to follow you online, where can they do so?
I'm at Journey Dan, and I am also at Android Central. So find me at both places. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Thanks
Absolutely.
so
Always, man. Good to see you. Take care, Daniel.
You too.
All right. Up next, Apple's iPhone event is happening next week. What can we expect? What's likely to happen? What's likely to be missed? Well, we're going to at least try and read the tea leaves here up next. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. Now, LastPass made a commitment to protecting its users and promoting good security behaviors. They've really done a great job of doing this for employees who are working remote, especially where we're at right now. So many people working remote. 25 million users, 70,000 businesses over the last 12 years that they've been working to protect. It's no surprise why they're an award-winning #1 password manager. I just love LastPass. Living in a remote work environment has greatly impacted identity and access management for businesses. Adjusting to an online workforce hasn't just been about logistics, solving the problems of logistics. It's also been a security issue. LastPass has been a saving grace to so many companies. One in particular leveraged LastPass to enable the team to set up, utilize, and share strong passwords for their accounts and programs. Not only was this a crucial and progressive step towards improving data security, but it also helped ease the burden of the shift to working from home full time. Everybody is experiencing this and has for a while and trying to solve this and figure out the best way to go towards this. If you haven't used them yet, now is the time for your business to get LastPass. They will help you transition your remote workforce. They have single sign-on that manages employee access in a centralized view, so IT always has insight into who has access to what and from where. Enterprise password management that ensures oversight of shadow IT and enforceable policies across all password-protected accounts. You've got multi-factor authentication that requires additional factors to prove a user's identity. I love it. I use it all the time in conjunction with my LastPass account. It integrates my biometric, my fingerprint sensor, or other contextual factors to just really make the process smooth for employees. Their zero-knowledge security model actually protects everyone from the individual user to the biggest organization that uses LastPass. Truly, your security is their top priority. And they allow employees to go passwordless and access to the tools that they need to work. LastPass uses AES 256-bit encryption with PBKDF2 SHA-256 and salted hashes to ensure complete security in the cloud. Data is encrypted and decrypted at the device level, so your data in the vault is secret from everyone, including LastPass. We use and love LastPass at Twit. I've been using it for years, and then we kind of brought it in-house and relied on it on a company level, and it makes everything so much easier, so much more secure. LastPass has won 8 awards so far just this year. They are PC Mag's Editor's Choice. They won the Fortress Cybersecurity Award, and they are Business Insider's Best Overall Password Manager, just to name a few. You don't have to just take our word for it. LastPass really speaks for itself, and in fact, later this afternoon at 1 p.m. Pacific. So if you're watching live, you might be able to join this live. If you're watching after the fact, you can catch it after the fact on our Twit site. Make sure and go there and look for it. But that's today at 1 p.m. Pacific. You can join us for a special online panel of security experts sponsored by LastPass. Leo Laporte, Bruce Schneier, Father Robert Balaser, Brian Chi, and Gerald Buchelt. They're going to discuss 5 common attack scenarios and best practices to defend against them. So it's not going to be your typical panel discussion Panelists are going to be divided into attackers and defenders, each of them presenting their cases. Really cool stuff. Do not miss it. So there is no better time to get LastPass. You can ease the burden for yourself and your remote workforce with the cybersecurity protection that you need. Go to lastpass.com/twit. That's lastpass.com/twit. We thank LastPass for their support of Tech News Weekly.
Alrighty, folks. So Apple has sent out the invites for a Tuesday event, 10 a.m. Pacific time. Of course, Leo Laporte and I will be covering that event live right after iOS Today on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And I thought it would be good to invite someone on to kind of talk about, yes, reading the tea leaves, but also reading the hardware infrastructure and the software leaks and everything in between. And frankly, there's no better site to talk about that than 9 to 5 Mac, and no better person than their own Zac Hall. Welcome back to the show, Zac.
Hey, how are you, Mikah?
I am doing well, and I hope you are as well.
Yeah, a big secret of ours is we actually do rely on tea leaves. It's the way we do everything.
I knew it. Okay, so let's talk about this. I think the best way to go about it is to break things up into two kind of categories. We've got the stuff that we can pretty much definitely count on happening, and then some of the stuff that maybe we've heard rumors about it happening or could possibly happen, etc. So let's start with at an iPhone event in October, which is normally held in September. In years past, we've always been able to count on a new version of the iPhone. Can we count on a new version of the iPhone at this October event?
This is the iPhone 12 event. So you're right. Since the iPhone 5, iPhones have come out in September. The iPhone 4S was an October release, and before that, they were in the summertime. But this is something that Apple had to communicate out, in their earnings, conference call to say they're not going to have a new iPhone in September this year because it's been such a ritual every year that to be a few weeks later is a big deal financially for the company.
Yeah. So what do we think is going to be happening with the new iPhone? How many models? What kind of sizes are we looking at? What are the new features, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the way the iPhone looks is always one of the big things, of the year. If it has the same look as last year, it's not as big of an exciting thing. This year, the iPhone is expected to look very different. It will look a bit like the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 5 and the new iPad Pro, where it has a flat side instead of those rounded sides that we've had since the iPhone 6 several years ago. And not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 new models, ranging from 5.4 inches, which is smaller than the current iPhone 12 Pro or iPhone 11 Pro, and as high as 6.7 inches, I believe. So we're looking at some big phones here and small phones, so the whole range.
Yeah, a smaller phone. Now that I think is a fascinating thing. For some reason at this point, we can always count on, pretty large phones that maybe we used to call phablets, but these days it's just the standard phone size. But what do we think is the reasoning behind, heading the other way with it, these smaller phones? Is it because the iPhone SE of years past has done well enough to kind of encourage this, or is it more just Apple is experimenting in new ways, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of in recent years they've had the iPhone 7 and iPhone 8 to sort of serve this market of smaller phones. And now they have the new iPhone SE, which is the same size as an iPhone 8, but it's the kind of phone with bezels on top and bottom and a home button. And the iPhone 12 mini will be, we believe, 5.4 inches and mostly all screens. So you won't have the home button and those big bezels. So it'll be about the size of the current iPhone SE or the iPhone 8, but with an all-screen design. So they kind of fill in that market, with a new model, but it is as modern as the iPhone 10 and later.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So iPhone definitely we can count on. Now let's take that slider and move it a little bit more toward the rumor and may happen scale. Kind of what do we think is expected but not as locked in as iPhone?
Yeah, I like to call it the stuff Apple's going to release but hasn't yet. And so there's a lot of stuff in that category, and whether or not it's at this event or not, we'll see. But Apple's, for years now, they've been rumored to be working on over-ear headphones that are more customizable than Beats and have some kind of intelligence that they don't offer to Beats. And so we think those will be called AirPods Studio. Hopefully we see them here because Apple's doing a lot of stuff with iOS 14.2 beta that involves better way of handling sound and AirPlay and Bluetooth. And that it usually means if they're changing the UI that there's a hardware product coming to benefit, to kind of complement that. And that could also mean Air or HomePod Mini. So the current HomePod has been around for a little while. It's kind of expensive, kind of high end to have one in every room. And HomePod Mini is what we think will happen this year to be a smaller, more affordable version of the HomePod. And then there's a lot of other stuff. Airtag is a thing that we found like over a year ago, maybe over 2 years ago. It's been so long now. And we've learned everything about it. The first time that we had a report on it, honestly, I was skeptical. It's like, why are they making a Tile item tracker, of their own? And we've since seen them do things with close proximity and changing the way that their Find My network works, so that the idea here is you put this attachment on your keys or suitcase or dog or whatever, and every iPhone that volunteers to kind of operate in the space can be a beacon of location anonymously. And so you turn the iPhone ecosystem into a tracking system anonymously and securely for your lost items. So that's super exciting. And then finally, there's a big one, which is Apple Silicon, Apple using their own chips instead of Intel in their Macs. And they say that they'll have the first Apple Silicon Mac by this year. And there's some rumors that say it could be a third event in November. Guess we'll see. But we do hope to hear something about Apple Silicon at this event at least.
All right. And then finally, let's take that slider and just push it all the way to the other side. Is there anything that has been rumored or, as you said, read in the tea leaves that is probably not going to happen here, but could happen here? Or did it kind of get covered in that middle category? Or maybe I just want to know, is there anything that you think could possibly in some world happen, but has not been introduced yet?
Yeah, I mean, there's still more stuff here that hasn't come out yet. So an update to the Apple TV right now. The Apple TV 4K is the highest end model, and it's been the same price since launch a few years ago. There is room for better graphics performance in the Apple TV, especially with Apple Arcade being a focus. There's rumors of a new Siri remote. That's the remote that has the trackpad and Siri input. Some people like it. A lot of people loathe it. So there's some rumors of a redesign there. And then even further on, we're kind of in a funny place with iPads where the iPad Air, which comes out sometime this month, but we don't have a date yet, and has already been announced, has a faster chip or at least a newer chip than the iPad Pro, which mostly is the same chip from a couple of years ago. So we think we'll see A14, some variation of that in a new iPad Pro with a better display in the 12.9-inch model. We just don't know when that's going to be, if it's going to be the end of this year or the beginning of next year.
Gotcha. Well, Zac Hall, I want to thank you for coming on and giving us kind of the rundown leading up to the event. Of course, we will know for sure on Tuesday when the event happens. And of course, we should all stay posted to 9to5Mac to kind of get the news after the event and what's come out, what's not. But if folks want to follow you online, where do they go to do that?
You can read 9to5Mac or read spaceexplorer.com. I do both. We're all on the same network, but I'm splitting my time between Apple News and Space News. So that's where I'm doing these days. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll happily have you back on again in the future.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Zac. I had to look this up real quick because I had one of those thoughts about tea leaves, and I was like, seriously, where does this saying come from? Apparently, it comes from tasseography, which is the practice of telling someone's fortune by reading a splotched or smeared substance. So it actually ties into the Apple announcement because you always see the invites, and then everybody's like, what does this mean? It really is exactly like reading the tea leaves. There you go. Learn something new every day. All right, up next, we're going to talk about the health and safety of autonomous vehicle backup drivers. Things have gotten really complicated for them with COVID and with wildfires in California. Very interesting discussion to be had there. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Expressvpn. We all know how a VPN protects our privacy and our security online. But did you know that it can take your TV watching to the next level? You can actually use a VPN to unlock movies and shows that are only available in other countries, region locked to certain countries. And a VPN, of course, can say, hey, I'm coming from over here instead of over here. And that can open up these region locks so that you can actually, binge on Doctor Who or Star Trek on the UK Netflix. It's really easy to do with ExpressVPN. You just fire up the ExpressVPN app, change your location to the UK in this example, and then you just refresh Netflix, and that's it. Netflix sees you as connecting to their site through the UK because you are through via ExpressVPN, and suddenly you have access to any of the media that is hosted for UK users of Netflix in that way. Pretty awesome. ExpressVPN hides your IP address and lets you control where you want sites to think you're located. And you can choose from almost 100 different countries. So just think about all the Netflix libraries that you can go through in that case. If you love anime, you can use ExpressVPN to access Japanese Netflix and be spirited away. But it's not just Netflix, of course. ExpressVPN works with any streaming service, Hulu, BBC iPlayer, YouTube, you name it. There are hundreds of VPNs out there, of course, but the reason that I use ExpressVPN to watch shows is that it's just super fast. It's crazy fast. There's never any buffering or any lag, and I can stream in HD absolutely no problem, even through the VPN, which is awesome. ExpressVPN is also compatible with all of your devices, so phones, media consoles, smart TVs, and more. So you can watch what you want on the go or on the big screen, wherever you happen to be. You could, if you have an Android TV box, let's say you have the Chromecast with Google TV, there is an ExpressVPN app that you can install on that directly and have it run so that, automatically, like within the Android TV ecosystem, you're just right there being able to kind of change your location, watch something new on Netflix or whatever other service that you're using. Pretty awesome stuff. If you visit our special link right now, it's expressvpn.com/TNW. You can get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. Support the show when you do that. Watch what you want and protect yourself. expressvpn.com/TNW, and we thank ExpressVPN for their support of this show.
Thank you, ExpressVPN, for powering my other country television watching for sure.
There we go.
All right, folks. Some of us are living in a time and a place where we have to stay indoors, not just because of the coronavirus, but also have to keep our doors and windows closed because the wildfires are causing air quality issues in the surrounding area. But what if you work for a company that needs you on the road, out and about, day in and day out? Things are different for those folks. And we are joined today by Andrew Hawkins of The Verge to talk about safety drivers from autonomous vehicle testers Waymo and Cruise and the bleak choice they face. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, happy to have you here. So obviously this is a situation where we have kind of two things going on at once, and all of the other things that are also happening, we'll just put those to the side for now just to talk about these two things, and that is the wildfire and the pandemic. And this is a very specific group of people that are doing a job that is required in many cases for autonomous vehicle testing. So can you talk about what a safety driver does before we kind of get into the bleak choice that you've written about here in this article?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. It's not a very well-known job, I don't think. So I can understand we sort of need a basis before we talk about what the issues are. So you got these two companies, Waymo, which is spun out of Google, is owned by Alphabet, and Cruise, which is a subsidiary of General Motors. And there's sort of two main autonomous vehicle testing companies in the state of California. They do most of their testing in the Bay Area, focused around San Francisco and some of the surrounding communities. They each have hundreds of vehicles out on the road. And each one of those vehicles has one and sometimes two backup drivers that ride around in vehicles, are there to take control of the vehicle if something goes wrong and they need to sort of step in and actually take the wheel. And they're also sort of monitoring the vehicles, the data that the vehicle is collecting as it's out testing on the roads. So these are hundreds, probably over 1,000 people or so working for both of these companies, riding in these cars day in, day out, multiple hours at a time. And it's not, like I said, not a very well-known job. You think of an autonomous vehicle, you think of a car with nobody in the car at all. We're not really at that stage yet. The technology hasn't really gotten to the point where it's okay to pull those cars out, those people out of the cars en masse. So there still needs to be sort of these employees there that sort of serve as a buffer in case the vehicles run into any sort of problems.
Understood. Okay, so yeah, now that we kind of have that base laid, we can talk about the situation. I really like how you wrote this story because it's not just simply kind of a coverage of the events or what's going on, but to actually get in and talk about individuals who are experiencing this thing. I thought about all of us who were sort of jokingly posting about Mars being less orange than the air has been in San Francisco and that kind of thing. But these folks, these safety drivers, have to get out on the road, and it seems that companies are kind of, in a way, requiring them to do so regardless. So let's talk about that. Kind of what is the big concern of these drivers and how it relates to the wildfires and air quality?
Sure. Yeah. So Waymo and Cruise both shut down their testing operations in early March, around the same time that a lot of things started to shut down in this country due to the pandemic. So those workers were sent home and they were continued to be paid for their job despite not being in the cars operating them in a testing capacity. After about a month or so, Cruise started to reintroduce its vehicles to the road. This is still in the midst of the pandemic. Thousands of people dying a day. Cruise started reintroducing its cars on the road, requiring its drivers to ride around in them as part of a delivery, a food delivery project that they kicked up with some local food pantries. Waymo, a couple weeks after, started doing the same thing, and then before you know it, you had hundreds of vehicles back out on the road again. I have been talking to some of these drivers over the last few months, and they've expressed to me a lot of concern about sort of the rush to get back out on the road. They felt like this is a job that obviously is important to the companies that are operating the vehicles, but are not considered essential vehicles by any of the local authorities, public health authorities, anything like that. There was a lot of restrictions in place, sort of trying to limit the number of vehicles that were on the road, and only saying only essential vehicles. And a self-driving car is not an essential vehicle, but they found their way around that by instituting this food delivery scheme. Flash forward a few months, you've got the wildfires over the summer. And that was sort of, another public health crisis on top of the pandemic that these drivers were already facing. So they felt that there was a lot that their safety was sort of being left off of the table and sort of the discussion to get these vehicles back on the road. They felt like it was being compromised, and that in the rush to get these test vehicles back out there, that they were sort of being left in the lurch. The companies, I spoke to the companies, they said that the safety of their drivers is of an utmost concern, and they sort of listed a number of the things that they do, requiring masks and doing temperature checks and all these things to sort of make sure that their drivers are kept safe, cleaning the cars. But the drivers I spoke to say it's undermined, that message of safety is undermined by these companies really rushing to get their vehicles back on the road, probably before they needed to.
Understood. So this, perhaps if one situation existed on its own, that would already be enough of a concern. But something that shocked me that I had no idea about was that in many cases, these drivers have to work in pairs. And with that, obviously, comes the concern of facing the pandemic. Because I was thinking about how when I get in the car, I will vehicle and it's hot outside, I turn on the AC and then I hit that little button that has the arrows pointing either way. And it basically says, instead of just bringing in fresh air and cooling it down, just keep recirculating the air in the car and cooling it down and not get any new air or mostly not get any new air from outside. And so, one might think, okay, if you just use that recirculation button, then you are protected from the air quality that's outside. But there's more to it than that. And that's where the pandemic comes into play. So can you talk a little bit about, I think, just why maybe it requires two people to be in a vehicle, and of course, how that's impacted by the pandemic?
Yeah, sure. So both Cruise and Waymo have vehicles that have dual drivers. So they have a person in the driver's seat, one in the passenger seat. The one in the driver's seat is there to sort of monitor the vehicle's operations and take control if the vehicle encounters a driving scenario, a double parked car, some sort of issue with pedestrians that its software can't really recognize, and therefore needs the human to sort of step in and take control of the vehicle. The person in the passenger seat, most likely is an engineer, a software engineer maybe, but they're there with a laptop sometimes and sort of watching the vehicle's vital signs, if you will. That's sort of the input of the data coming through the various sensors, the cameras, the LiDAR, the radar sensors, or they're just there to sort of make notations as to when certain scenarios come across. If the driver needs to take control of the vehicle because it encounters something that the car can't handle, then the passenger can be there to make a note in a notebook or on a clipboard, if you will, to sort of let the supervisors know and let the engineers know back at the home base what happened. Why this is an issue now with the pandemic is obviously because when you're in a car and you're sitting next to each other, you can't social distance. There's obviously not 6 feet between the driver's side and the passenger side of the vehicle. And so that was a concern to a lot of drivers. Cruise initially said that they were making sure that the two people that were driving in the cars together, they were working together, only together and never with anybody else. And Waymo has some vehicles that require one driver, a lot of vehicles that require two drivers. They're trying to reduce the number of dual driving vehicles that they have, eventually trying to pull both of the drivers out of the vehicles entirely, obviously, but they're not at that stage yet, and certainly not in California. So the issue is you can't socially distance when you're there. You're wearing masks. So you just, you open the window, you get the air circulating, obviously, and that's less of a danger. During the wildfires, that was not an option. You had terrible air pollution. The air quality was very unhealthy, lots of particulate matter. It was very bad for these drivers. And they were sort of faced with, like you mentioned at the beginning, with this really bleak choice. Have the windows down and let sort of all that particulate matter and air pollution come into the vehicles, or have the windows up and risk contracting COVID possibly from your partner. And the drivers I spoke to, they really felt like being forced into these situations by these companies was really it was very tough on them. Obviously, they keep it in perspective. It's not as tough as, a lot of people who are first responders and whatnot. But there was a sense that, this is an industry that is not really an essential industry at this point. It's very much a research and development industry. And therefore, they just didn't understand why there was this rush to get these vehicles back out on the road before it was safe to do so.
And then in this case, we're not talking about picking up passengers necessarily. This is just the two test drivers, right? Because where my mind goes with this is just a perspective of liability, if there's any sort of liability case to be made here. And I suppose it could apply to the two drivers in front too. One driver might feel maybe more comfortable with the windows up, the other one with the windows down. Either way, it's like a poison pill that they're forced to swallow. But is there any liability consideration here in combination with this?
So the vehicles in California are not operating by picking up passengers. It's not. They're merely in a testing position. Waymo has a taxi service in Arizona, in the Phoenix area where it operates. But neither company is authorized to pick up passengers yet in California. They're sort of seeking the permission to do so, and they hope to eventually launch sort of a ride-hailing commercial operating ride-hailing division where they can start actually to make money very soon. So having these cars out on the road right now, you can see sort of the monetary advantage that's going on here, why there's a financial incentive to do this. They both really are racing to launch their respective commercial taxi services, and they can't get there unless they have the maps, the data, the cars on the road, doing the driving, racking up the miles. And that's why the drivers are feeling so concerned, because they feel like the companies are putting financial imperatives above sort of human safety.
All right. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew, and kind of talking about this. It's something that, like you said, in the first place, this job in and of itself is not something that a lot of people know about. But then to take it a step further and talk about this unfortunate situation that they face, I think that both of those things kind of come together to give us a look into what's going on here. And I encourage everybody to go and read this article on The Verge. Of course, we'll link it in the show notes. But if folks want to follow you online, where do they go to do that?
Well, obviously at theverge.com, where all my work appears. Please go there and read for yourself. And also you can find me on Twitter. That's really the two places where you can find me.
Awesome. And what's your Twitter handle?
It's Andy J. Hawk, ANDY JAYHAWK.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Thank
you,
it
was fun. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. All right, 4 interviews and we are done. That is it. Phew. Jam-packed show. Love it when it works out like that. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday. If you go to twit.tv/TNW, we make it really easy for you. You just go to that site. You can find all the different ways to subscribe, YouTube, podcatchers, however you like, in audio and video formats, and then you won't miss a single episode.
Of course, you can also follow us on social media. We are at Twit on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at TwitTalk on TikTok, and you can tweet at me. I am at Mikah Sargent, also on all the other social media networks at Mikah Sargent, and we do appreciate you tuning in.
Nice. I'm at Jason Howell. If you want to check out this week's episode of Hands on Android, I highly recommend it. It's actually really great the way it came together. Last week, Google unveiled the Chromecast with Google TV, Google TV being the next version of Android TV, but that's the only device that it's on. Well, some crafty people pulled the install file of the Google Home launch, or sorry, the Google TV launcher, and somebody else figured out how to get it to work on Android TV boxes. So I followed that walkthrough. I show you how to do it step by step, twit.tv/HOA, and you can turn your Android TV box into a Google TV box before Google wants you to. And definitely check that out. Big thanks to John Ashley at the studio for editing that, as well as pushing the buttons and editing this show behind the scenes. Also, big thanks to Burke for helping out. And thanks to you for watching and listening each and every week. We'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, host at Twit TV. Got a question for you. Have you gotten tired of how bad your photos are looking every time you post them to Instagram? Better yet, have you gotten yourself a new camera and you can't quite figure out why the images just don't look that good? Well, I have a solution for you. It's my show, Hands on Photography. Each and every Thursday, I sit down and share different tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer and a better post processor. So subscribe today at twit.tv/hop to learn more.